Okay.
Okay. Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Scarborough Ad Hoc Downtown Development Committee. Calling the meeting open.
With
Very
authority.
official.
Each one's going to get a little bit louder, trust me. We may have a couple of more members filter in over the next few minutes, but we have 6 members present, 1 member remote or attempting to get remote, and 2 who we've not heard from yet. Dan Bacon is remote and Karen Martin is unavailable to join us tonight. So that's our attendance. Let's start with the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from our previous meeting? Motion from Art. Do I have a second? Second from Kim. Thank you. Is there any discussion, questions, adjustments? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay, developers report. I don't know, Dan, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. Yeah, for some reason my video isn't able to operate, so it's just my voice this evening. So I apologize for that. Let's see, and Rocky is not joining us this evening, so it's just me. In terms of developers report, let's see. Well, I mean, there was a WEX article in the Press Herald this week, so that's not positive news, but not unexpected. I think as we've been talking about for a number of months at the committee level, that project has been on hold for 8 to 10 months. So not surprised by the announcement, but also not excited about it, obviously. Luckily, we have a downtown plan working with this committee that's really geared around other anchors and placemaking and all the good work that we've been doing and you've been doing. So we've been preparing for it and have a new course, but didn't want to just ignore that press that came out earlier in the last few days. Other than that, Innovation District, on a much more positive note, we've been talking about this for a while. We're essentially sold out. So we're under contract or more with I believe all the lots in the district at this point. So it's pretty remarkable. We've been on quite a positive pace, but it's essentially 2 years since we were approved for the Innovation District. You can believe that. So work started this month 2 years ago. So we're quite proud of that and think it's remarkable based on sort of the conditions we've been in. And obviously it's a good product and a good fit for the town and a successful part of the Downs. And then other than that, residentially, we're continuing to progress through design and permitting. The townhouses that were permitted in the spring started construction. It's a different housing type. We're pretty excited about those that we think are a good type of housing on the edge of the downtown area. So that's kind of progressing as been planned and talked about over the last many months. And I would say lastly, we continue to work with Goody Clancy on kind of fine tuning our plan, based on the workshop we had a month and a half ago, and really kind of working through making sure the road system and the blocks that we kind of laid out work for the type of development that we're planning in the downtown. So, we're not certainly at like subdivision level plans, but we're kind of progressing those plans to move in that direction and continue to do so. So I think that's really what I have at the high level, Travis, and pleased to continue to participate in the meeting as questions come up or topics need to involve me. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dan. And congratulations on selling out the Innovation District. That's, I think, probably exceeds everybody's expectations on how fast that would happen. So proof you're doing great work. Are there any questions for Dan on his report before we move on?
Is there
another presentation going to be given by the designers? Dan?
So to this committee, that's something we need to talk about. We haven't scheduled anything like that, Bruce. What we have scheduled, and it's something that actually was talked about at the workshop, is we have scheduled a workshop with the planning board for late August. And it's not necessarily just for the downtown. It's also to talk about overall progress on the project. There are a few new planning board members who want kind of the bigger picture presentation. And it's also talking about transportation, but we will be including, you know, in that workshop discussion on the downtown. So right now, that's our kind of next scheduled discussion on the downtown. And I think Goody Clancy will be participating in that, if not in person, via Zoom.
And Dan, I was going to ask this later on in the agenda, but we have asked for an extension for this committee until the middle of September. Do you anticipate that there would be any changes to what Goody Clancy presented to this committee before then, or only because part of our report is responding to the Goody Clancy model? Do you think that there's any chance that will change in the next really realistically 4 weeks?
Not substantive changes, Travis. I think we're continuing to fine tune. You know, we're kind of in that was a very conceptual plan. So we need to make it more real in terms of, you know, street widths and block areas, etc. So, but sort of the framework of the plan, we're not proposing to change, and you know, nothing's happened since then, or we don't anticipate happening to change the substance of the plan.
Okay, great.
So is that meeting that's proposed at the end of this month at the planning board, is that an open meeting? I mean, can I attend? Can the committee attend?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a workshop by the planning board and it's a public meeting. So that's certainly
Oh, okay, great.
the public. I think we're still working out the details of where it is. I think it might be at the grandstand, similar to, you know, our workshop that we had. And I think within a week or two, we'll have much more details on the agenda, and we can share that with the committee when that's set up, when that's established.
Yeah, Dan, this is Tom. By all means, share those details with me and I'll pass it around to the committee.
Thanks.
Anything else for Dan? Seeing nothing, thank you, Dan. I would like to take one item out of order on the agenda. Item 6 is a vote of the committee to adopt our remote meeting policy now that the state's emergency order has expired. We've drafted a remote meeting policy that largely aligns with policies that already exist in the town of Scarborough. I hope you've all had a chance to look it over. I would entertain a vote to adopt and a second, and then we can get into discussion.
So moved.
Moves to adopt. I have a second. Seconds. Okay. Discussions, questions. Is there anything in there that anyone had concerns with? It's really only going to be for 3 meetings, I think. But so far it's working. I think if there's nothing from the committee, I have nothing. Going once, going twice. All in favor? Vote unanimous. Okay, so let's get into the report categories. As we had talked about at our last meeting, this is the framework for the report that we want to deliver to Crossroads and to the town council. So we have 4 meetings left, including today, although the last meeting I suspect will be largely reviewing a prepared document. So I think ultimately we have 3 meetings to work through these bullets and make sure that we're comfortable with what we want to recommend goes in them. And then at that final meeting on September 14th, we'll have discussion on whether any elements need to be changed, and then have probably a series of votes to adopt it. So I'll quickly run through the first couple of them. Existing conditions is material that Karen Martin's preparing for us. That is results of the Votorama, of the town's long-term planning initiatives, and all of the conditions that put us where we are today, including the order from the town council. So that's nothing that we have responsibility over. We'll certainly have the opportunity to give feedback, but there's really no reason to bring that up tonight, especially with Karen not here. Key wants and needs, that was the series of exercises that we performed leading up to the Goody Clancy presentation. I think that we may reopen that on that final day to see if we've changed anything significantly, but I think that that's also one that we can consider complete for now until we have something written. So what remains are unique recommendations, our response to what we saw from Goody Clancy, recommendations on ordinances, and a recommendation on a management structure when this committee has completed our work. So unique recommendations, what we've included in that already are the report that the grandstand committee prepared and the work that the modeling committee prepared as guidance for what makes successful downtowns. I guess I want to open up whether there's anything specific that didn't fall into those recommendations and that maybe belongs in a position elevated above the wish list that we prepared. Is there anything that anybody wants to bring before the committee tonight that they think is worth us taking an individual vote on and maybe collecting a little bit more information on to add to that section? And let me get back to that because I do just want to run through what I hope we discuss in all of these bullets tonight. Goody Clancy model, we've had the opportunity to respond. Karen is taking copious notes. Bruce wasn't with us at the last meeting, so I want to give you a chance to give your thoughts. And then I think that's going to be a matter of collating those notes and hopefully we'll have some useful stuff for Crossroads. Ordinance recommendations, Dan, I think what I'm going to do, you presented some materials to the committee. It was late at our last meeting. I think what I'd like to ask, and if you're not prepared to do this today, then we can save it for maybe our next meeting. I think I'd like to ask you to give us some specific questions. You gave us a lot of supportive material about, if ordinance if housing was allowed to be built faster, then the downtown could come on faster and so on. But I think it might be useful for the committee to hear from you what the specific asks may be. And I know that some of the bullets that were going to be in this section are things that we may ask the town to contribute to. And I don't think that we're at a place where we can come up with numbers yet, but I think if we can identify some items, in particular the grandstand, that we think will probably require public investment, at the very least, we can make recommendations on subject matter, if not dollar amount. And then management structure, we haven't really gotten into yet, but I think it's a really important conversation. So let's start with unique recommendations. I'm curious, Bruce, do you want to pitch a carousel? Does anybody have anything that we think is worth?
That was just pie in the sky. I just thought it was an interesting concept of an opportunity to perhaps have something that would attract people locally back regularly. And then something that also might have some appeal for people who were in a 20-mile radius visiting. They just might want to come and see something like that. It's a little bit of tongue in cheek. I mean, I wasn't horribly serious about it. I mean, it would be interesting. I mean, it's $1.5 million contraption, and God knows what it's going to take to support it. But there is, it was just a place where Friday nights, the older generation could sit around and watch the younger generation sort of hanging out. It seems like it would support ice cream, these little water park things. Just wait for everybody to get together. Mm-hmm. So it was truly a spitball idea. I wasn't sitting here trying to promote it. And then another idea came up. As long as I get 2 seconds here, there were model railroading clubs that do GGAs, which is garden scale railroading, which could involve you got guys building stuff and people coming to watch that stuff. And I've seen that There is where I came from in Northern Virginia, the town of Vienna had a kind of a large botanical garden, and a section of it was set aside for model railroading or something like that. But it was just a way to, not only was it a demonstration, it was a participatory sort of thing. The people contribute to it. Clubs kept it up and going and rickety rackety, but it was just a way to, it was just something else within the park that has some, but we've only got an acre here, not to say that that's small, but I'm not sure if we've got enough, can afford it from a land standpoint to start adding things like that.
Did that require significant infrastructure, or was that more of a programming?
No, it was just programming. You just set off an area there, which I believe in this particular situation, they had their own little structure where the model railroading club got together, built stuff. It was sort of the train station, and then all the trains went out and running through the gardens like that. So it was just something that it attracted a lot of people to come out and just watch those things. I mean, it wasn't all day, every day. It was a couple hours on the weekends here and there. So.
Well, I mean, it just brings to mind to me that we're a long time between now and a finished product, and I know that we've talked about, and the Crossroads has talked about, events and things that the space can be used for before it's built out.
Well, it is something that, you don't just sort of pull the tracks up and put it away, I mean, you really sort of commit that space, and it just is there because it's sort of built, the tracks go down, the little buildings go down, and, all these sort of event things that happen. I mean, they've really got to stay in place. So
Okay.
it's a commitment of space.
Mhm. Tom?
If I could just to chime in on that, I think as we look at the management structure portion of this, it may be important to sort of, for ideas like that, maybe bake them into whatever sort of continuation of this committee exists. So as the final form comes more into sort of that firm vision, those decisions can kind of be made by a committee that still has similar authority to ours, potentially, as we have, a more complete presentation to what to commit that space to.
And it's a lot quieter than a carousel. I mean, I'm not sure if I'd want to have a house next to something making a big boom chang thing all the time.
Well, it probably makes sense when we make our recommendations for a management structure that we come up with a list of stuff like that. I think it's part of our wish list included things that space could be used for. And I think we might want to turn that into a list of recommendations for a permanent management group.
Yeah, I was going to say, a theme that seems to resonate across all these ideas is really having that outdoor space, the village green or the open space, and even that concept of some covered space, which is part of the grandstand today, having it just be flexible so it can be used for a Saturday afternoon for one event, and just having that flexibility. So and it goes back to management. Someone's got to program that space and execute the event and so on and so forth. But flexibility is going to be huge, I think.
Mhm.
When we say a management structure, we mean a developer management structure, recommendations around that, right? Because assuming and maybe we have a recommendation about that none of this is public property, right?
I think that's a conversation for the management structure portion. I mean, I think we talked about having that conversation because a lot of our discussions veer back to programming, and somebody has to be in charge of it. And so one of the things that may come with that recommendation is we may make a strong recommendation that there's some public ownership there. But I think that when we get to that portion, that's when we'll want to talk about those things.
Yeah. I know in the Mashpee Commons, like, there's a developer management, and they manage all of that. So nonprofits and other organizations come to them and ask them to use their space. And I'm not suggesting that's what we want to do. I was just wondering, management structure, it sounds like it's bigger than just management structure that we would ask the developer to have or recommend they have, but it could be a management structure related around town uses of the.
It could be my community services department plays some role in programming that space.
Right.
One of the concepts that I'm interested in exploring is called a business improvement district. The Old Port has a designated BID. Essentially, everyone within this designated geographic area agrees to a special additional tax, basically, which goes to support agreed upon activities. It could be maintenance, simple infrastructure type things, but it could also be, paid staff to do the marketing and management of the space. So I think that's an interesting financial model and maybe interesting management model as well, that there's a ready means to finance that operation and staff that operation as opposed to leaving it to chance.
Two of the models that we looked at too in our committee's work, in addition to just having sort of the developers management organization that handled leases and sort of other programming. We also saw a sort of public feedback mechanism. So there was sort of the ability for the public to make comment on the activities of that space. I can't remember which model it was that we were looking at that allowed for that. Every 6 months or 12 months, there was basically an open house where you could come in and give feedback. And that sort of allowed the continuation of public comment, in addition to one of the other models, which had sort of a town liaison, mostly for programming and events. And there was a sort of a counterpart on the developer side. So the two could work together for events and for other types of programming like that. So those are also, I think, options that we could potentially utilize in that management structure if we didn't want to propose an entire developers organization to handle that. There are sort of smaller ways to have input still, I think, going forward.
So let me just ask, because this is an item on our agenda that I do want us to spend a lot of time on. Do we want to close unique recommendations for now? And I think everybody's pretty excited to talk about management structure. Is there anything else that fits in that category of?
I don't know if it fits in the category, but there was an interesting conversation, since the last meeting around the size of the green, and that might. So I don't know if it's unique, but I think it would be a specific recommendation if this committee has an opinion about that size. I think we ought to be very clear in that regard.
Yeah, and I think that I was going to bring that up in the next in the Goody Clancy model. But some things to think about are a gazebo is a unique recommendation, and benches are unique recommendations. And some of those things to think about over the next few weeks. But let's move into the Goody Clancy model discussion. Sorry, go ahead, Kim.
Before you move from unique recommendations, it's a question. So in the report, we would attach the report of the grandstand committee and the report of the modeling committee. Is that what you're thinking? Is just the modeling committee is more a bunch of research, right? Summarized, but it would somehow be an appendix. Or
we talked about including them as appendices with probably a one-page summary for each in the body.
Yeah, I suspect there'll be some language that refers to that work.
Yeah.
But references the full body of the work as an appendix.
Right. I mean, I think there could be a lot of things that point back to the modeling committee material sprinkled throughout our report. To Tom's point, there's some specific items about management structure that we may want to point back to the report from. So let's move on to the Goody Clancy model discussion. I want to give Bruce the chance to give his feedback. And Sarah, were you were with us at our last meeting? You were not. Okay. So I want to give Bruce and Sarah the opportunity to give their feedback. And then I do want to make sure we have a discussion about the green space and whatever else has sort of been on people's mind over the last couple of weeks. So Bruce, how about you start us off? What'd you think?
Well, actually, I'm not sure what I'm responding to here. Is this the Goody presentation that we were all part of? And well, I pretty much said what I wanted to say about that there. I think that phase of development was fine, but I'm sort of looking forward to the next phase where all those things that we had talked about, where you would have outside eating, and areas like that. I think the presentation is exactly what I thought we should be getting, blocks of, where the retail is, where the restaurants are, where the parks are, and so everything was sort of laid out that way, and it's the right step. And then we talked generally about how the transportation and circulation was working from a vehicle standpoint. We didn't really talk too much about how the pedestrian experience was going to be from what I remembered. And, you know, we were also talking earlier about things like, you know, boulevards versus smaller streets versus sidewalks that you eat on versus sidewalks that, you know, things that sort of allow you to explore a place as you walk through. Those things just hadn't been fleshed out yet. So that's kind of what was leading me to that question earlier about when's the next presentation, so we could see that. You know, it's not excruciating level of detail, but we'll start to understand where boulevards and secondary streets are going to be, and where the eating is going to happen, and maybe a little bit of massing of the structures in that area. So I really don't have anything to add to what I had already said earlier about.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think I made a couple comments at the presentation as well, just mainly regarding the pedestrian and sort of the trail traffic. So how are we going to connect with other parts of Scarborough? What does the trail network look like within the Downs itself, and how that connects to the downtown, the center? But yeah, otherwise I was, really impressed with what we were presented with, and it was really helpful for me as sort of a visual person to kind of put understand everything that we've been talking about and sort of visualize that. So yeah, that was my only feedback.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else have anything they've been ruminating on since 2 weeks ago? Kim?
Dan, I have a question for you. When I went back and started to look at the Goody Clancy presentation, and I don't have a good sense of how big that downtown is. Like, is it 3 stores or 15 stores or something like that? Because the residential is really coming in close to that downtown. And I was just kind of curious as to, for me personally, what that downtown scale is like.
Are you talking in terms of floor area for retail? Or
Well, is it
like vertically?
3 shops or 10? I mean, there must be some sort of a I know it's hard to like Bruce was telling me, he said that there must be some sort of a calculation or something.
Yeah, they have it by square footage, I think.
It is by
right,
square
Dan?
footage, okay.
We do. That's I was going to say $1 million question, but I think it's more than $1 million. It's what we're basically at the last meeting, we did talk about kind of getting more information to the committee on our market analysis, because we talked about how critical it is to have housing within the downtown for retail and restaurant to activate, as well as important to have a grocery anchor. That was kind of part of our kind of necessary actions, not necessarily just town actions, but project actions, is to have a significant amount of housing early to create customers and vitality. Ideally a grocery anchor kind of early. A grocery would be on the order of 55 to 85,000 square feet, to kind of give you a sense of scale. The sports, a sports complex, ideally to be a hub for daily activity by town residents, but also bring folks in from the broader region or out of state. And in terms of kind of a retail square footage outside of those, if those other things happen, we think we're kind of in the 50 to 75,000 square feet range of, say, retail, restaurant, service type square footage. So that could be maybe as a benchmark, you might want to think of 4 Bessie Squares, something like that across from Town Hall. And if the project's really successful, there could be more, but you need those early ingredients to really get any frankly, so that's what we're still trying to figure out to answer your question, Kim. You can sort of use other past models as go-bys, but every site's unique, and ours is particularly unique in that it's not particularly visible to the exterior road system. It's a pretty internal downtown. So that's why those other things are even more important early on.
Dan, I just want to follow up. You said that there could be more. I think I made a comment at the last meeting that, one of my not concerns, I hope and think you're going to be wildly successful. And so I wonder, as Kim alluded to earlier, you're building residential right up to it right now. So where is that expansion? Where does the more go if we find ourselves in that position?
So we've been looking at the Goody Clancy plan, obviously, and working on it, and feel like the more is kind of north of the grandstand. So working our way north to the grandstand residentially, and then having, doing a block or a building or two at a time, working south to north of where Center Street comes into the Downs Road. So, I mean, if you look at models out there, their downtowns are not big. Mashpee Commons is not big, actually, in terms of acreage. And Mashpee Commons is developed under old retail model that arguably is not realistic in the next 5 to 10 years or beyond. So we're thinking about that, Tom, but we're also not planning for sort of like reserving tens of acres, because it's highly unlikely that retail restaurant would take that up. Maybe office, if office comes back, or other things that are larger footprint end users, but.
So when you say, well, a couple of questions. One, when you say a grocer that's 55 to 85,000 square feet, you're talking about a full-size grocery store. You're not talking about Trader Joe's or something like that. You're talking about a Hannaford, but it won't be Hannaford, I'm sure, but that's the size you're talking
Yeah,
about.
this Hannaford is about 80,000
Yeah,
square feet.
so you're
Okay.
talking big grocer with big parking
Full
lot.
size.
And then the other question I had was, when you say like for Bessie Commons, is that in addition to the grandstand? Because I'm assuming the grandstand.
I can actually, if I have permission to share my screen, we just, end of last week, updated the master plan to lay on the new downtown. So a visual, I think, would help the committee.
Yep.
Can everybody see that? Okay.
Yep.
I know that you're in seats, so your computer's not super close, but this is the overall master plan. So this is, this area, if you can see my cursor, is what Goody Clancy, generated and presented the committee. The colors are probably a bit different because we integrated into the master plan, but this is basically from here. Maybe this would be a good tool to use. It's what you were presented, a month and a half ago or so. So, Kim, to answer your question, this is that, kind of grocery site, which is on the edge.
Yep.
I would have shared parking and would, be part of the downtown, an important contributor, but not like a downtown design, not a on Main Street kind of design. It's on the edge. This is the park area. So early on, we're anticipating, this area being where initial restaurant and retailers would want to be if there's demand. Right along the park, outdoor dining, that kind of thing, engaging with the open space, the grandstand, down here, we're really anticipating being more kind of residential, help activate the area and have, people on the street and customers and activity. And so, Tom, what I was alluding to is, if it's wildly successful, this area up here, which is geographically north, towards the Downs Road up towards Payne Road, is where additional retail, commercial, et cetera, could happen and not happen right off the bat.
And up there where like number 16, 15, 12, that's the innovation district? Okay.
Yeah. So that's the innovation district, and those identified, stuff, either buildings that are complete or underway or will be starting.
So what's that big retail over? Yeah, that one.
That's a larger.
That's the unnamed.
We have a number of unnamed things, but that's a larger retailer that we're talking to. That's interested in that Payne Road site. Wouldn't be interested in downtown.
I see. Okay.
Art?
Dan, maybe, and this is kind of a suggestion. When your first renderings came out almost 2 years ago, there was a decent sized park north of the grandstand in relationship to this plan. That block that's up north of the grandstand, I just really kind of fell in love with that park because it has a few playgrounds. It had a lot of diversification surrounded by those retail businesses where you can move what's currently there just a block up. It would still be surrounded pretty well. I viewed it as our version of Central Park, like in New York. I think what's there is nice and quaint, but I don't think it's big enough, to be honest, for a lot of multi-purposed events. Again, it's 2 years of drafting architecture.
Or
What
do
you're
you
saying
mean geographic north, or do you mean map north?
Map North, I'm sorry.
Got it.
Map North, yeah.
You're talking about in here,
Yeah, right.
That's where the original whole.
early concept that had it was basically something like this block, if you can picture, if you can see my cursor, and I don't know
Yes.
how well you can see it or not, but
I suspect Art's barometer is whether motor booty affair could play there.
No, actually not. Well, I just saw it as a central gathering point. I mean, the original drawings did have a bandstand or a small stage. But I liked how it was flanked by proposed smaller businesses, walking distance. You could walk from one side to the grandstand. I mean, it was very walkable. It was a center point of the property.
So that's what's kind of moved down into that acre triangle.
Yes,
And
I think that acre it's nice, but it's hidden.
And we've talked about flexibility, as you've mentioned that the residential is going to spill down more to the, I guess, map south here. Exactly that area there, further down, yeah. As residential sort of spills that way, if you needed to pivot with some additional retail and space, would that be able to potentially consume some of that map north town center residential, or is what's listed as in progress there sort of far enough along that that's likely not going to be able to be sort of adapted later on?
I think it could. I mean, the guidance we've been getting from Goody Clancy and Camoin and others is that area is, they perceive as really challenged for restaurant and retail from an accessibility standpoint, from like a visibility standpoint. And that's part of the reason are kind of that green space is shifted closer to here, this crossroads of coming in from Higas Parkway, Center Street, and then, you know, keeping what's now the old Downs Road and that connection to Payne Road, so that there's, you know, there's somewhat easy access into those businesses that can't survive just on the project, you know, internal residents and employees. So that's what we're getting from kind of the professionals who look at these plans and apply successes and failures elsewhere. And kind of played a role in how we pivoted the park and this focal point here. The other part of it is to be on the west side of the grandstand versus the east side, because it's a tall structure and casts a large shadow. So for outdoor dining and sun, you know, being on that side of that structure. I think office is less, you know, if office comes back stronger than it is right now. I think office is easier to kind of integrate east away from the main routes, because it's not relying on, you know, drive-by traffic and that accessibility like a restaurant or retail would be.
Team, where you have the rec field, so assuming that's the edge or somebody, and then you have a park behind that. Is that really going to be a developed park, or, yeah, right there?
Yeah, there's a pretty good sized wetland there, Kim. So it's, you know, we're anticipating trails through there, and there is some kind of upland area that there can be a park, but it's more of, you know, more passive versus like a large, like a memorial park that the land couldn't take that kind of activity. So we saw that park and that area being a decent complement to the rec fields that might have lights to kind of buffer some things that are, you know, development back here and then, you know, have those lights and the activity of the fields that could go into the evening, more kind of away from the neighborhood to the south, you know, residences, and also the ball field adjacent to the indoor sport. So it's the same campus, if you will.
So Dan, I'm just curious, when I look at that grocer and at the large retailer to be named later, is there a reason why those buildings are sort of tucked behind all of the parking as opposed to up closer to the road? I just think of how that's that kind of 70s model of a big parking lot with a building in back versus the building up closer to the activity and parking behind.
Yeah, that's a challenge in general with these end users who demand certain program in terms of where their parking is. The one up by Payne Road, which isn't really part of our discussion from a downtown standpoint, it's really the only way that fits on the site. Otherwise, you have basically the loading area facing Payne Road, which generally isn't that successful. So felt like that up there is a better kind of layout, even though it is cars up by Payne Road. Payne Road's not particularly walkable. So not people aren't walking along it to then walk into the retail. The one here, I think, still needs some work. But we're trying to lay it out in a way that it's activating the center of the project, if they're willing to locate there, but also not kind of dominating. And so letting these buildings be the downtown and having kind of shared parking in between. But I'm sure improvements could be made, certainly Travis, in terms of the layout there.
Those are, and I probably just didn't really notice them close enough. Those are like smaller retail on the corner. might be better facing for the downtown anyway.
Yeah, and grocery stores in particular have some practical needs just with deliveries and whatnot. So you've got a couple of sides of that building that are ugly, for lack of a better
Mhm.
word, that, you know,
Yeah.
that need to be
These
kind
two
of hidden.
sides.
You're talking about the buildings just
Kitty
to-
corner.
Sort of
to
opposite
the,
corner.
yeah,
Yeah.
those two.
No, I'm,
Closer to the park.
yeah, the,
Oh.
on the corner.
Oh,
Dan, I presume some of that parking would be convenient and used by folks going to the downtown as well, right?
Yeah, the intent of this design is that these are the multi-story mixed-use downtown buildings. And there's on-street parking, you know, on these two streets. This is all on-street parking, really from where it says road, you know, all the way up through to probably this intersection, you know, maybe beyond. You know, it's not called Main Street, but it's practically speaking, kind of a Main Street condition. These buildings are addressing the street, you know, wider sidewalks, et cetera. Tom, to your point, you know, this parking is really serving those. You know, this parking is really serving the market or grocery store.
Dan, a point that I think came up at last meeting, and I heard it from both Bruce and Sarah tonight, is just the pedestrian experience. And I'm just reminded, looking at this with Center Street and Scarborough Downs Road, you know, being major thoroughfares, that's how your folks are coming and going. Just how you're going to manage traffic speeds through this area in particular. Certainly on-street parking is going to help calming. Still think you ought to look at a rotary of some sort. That's me.
Where would you propose that?
Right there at the intersection of Scarborough Downs Road and Center Street.
That would be tough. Yeah, I was just gonna
That's,
say.
I mean, I don't,
Stop it.
I've done on a rotary, they're not particularly
speed bumps.
Yeah,
on the
you
streets.
Calming.
led me right into that, didn't you, Dan? Thank you for that.
Mhm.
I was just reminded, Portland just brought online
Yeah.
one at a very complicated intersection. I think there's
Yeah, by that main
six
law.
lanes that come in there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Let's, if nobody has any other questions on this sort of broader design, let's talk about scale of the green space a little bit, because it was a popular subject at our last meeting, and then it was a popular subject. I know I participated in some email exchanges of members of the committee over the last week. My opinion after visiting some various sized green spaces is that an acre is probably just about right. I work in the Cumberland County Courthouse, which is a large 4-story building, larger than probably anything that's going to be bordering our town green space. And outside my window, there's a one-way street with diagonal parking, and then Lincoln Park, which is an acre. When I look out my window from my office, I think it's a large amount of space seeing on the other side. And it seems like it's appropriately sized to me. So I just wanted to make sure that I went on the record that I think that size makes sense. And I wonder if anybody else, I know that Brian had contributed too, but he's not here tonight. If anybody else has more thoughts on that. Art?
I know the park, I don't know it well, but does it have any playgrounds? Does it have a gazebo in it?
It has a very large fountain. It has a lot of topiary, has large trees all through it, several paths, a lot of benches. It's
That's
built
why.
up pretty significantly, but no playgrounds, no permanent performance space or anything.
John Anderson, you were in Bar Harbor and offered up their Village Green as an example.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool example. Not only did it tie to this design really well in terms of what they do there. I don't know who's been to Bar Harbor, but it's surrounded by shops, just kind of like what they had designed. And when I walked by it, I was like, this is huge. It would be so nice to have something like this, but it's a little big. And I thought it was like 3 acres, but it was really just 1.5 acres. And so with that as a reference point, because again, like you want that experience of being able to cross, I think that was talked about at the meeting. You want to be able to cross across shops and use that as a place to kind of transition around as you're going to different places. And so I think 1 acre feels right with that in mind. Again, that was just my view when I went to Bar Harbor. Again, 1.5 acres felt a little big actually. So 1 acre might be just right.
I think the sort of really the decision this committee's got to make is, do we want that connectivity and that sort of interconnection and that center point, or do we want event activity like trains and carousels and an opportunity for concerts and those types of things? When we mentioned Bar Harbor in the email exchange, that was in my head kind of what I had in mind for this location, and to hear that it's only 1.5 acres, I think was very encouraging, especially if through the Goody Clancy designs, we're going to be able to spill into the streets without the curbs. So even though the green space may only be 1 acre, as soon as those curbs come down and the parking's eliminated, then for example, if there was a farmer's market or any other event where there were vendors that could line the street, now you've preserved the 1 acre and actually made the full space more like 1.5 acres. So I think that flexibility might land us at 1 acre being about the right sweet spot for this, if we're looking for connectivity and not some bigger structures or sort of, the younger generations, running around and taking up a fair amount of that space.
Sorry to jump on this a little bit. What, being on the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, I know town parks are part of charter or the plan to have parks in town. And I still think we're lacking in that space. Just off the top of my head, it's been a while since I've reviewed that.
Yeah, we are going to undertake a master, facility plan, if you will, which will include a full inventory of what we have. And I hope identify need and ideally even location of town where we might be deficient. So we're probably a year out from having that product in our hands, but your point's well taken. As we grow in population, our systems get stressed and we're going to need more open space.
Well, especially where we're potentially having 3,000 residents and 3,000 workers on this piece of property.
Can you put that back up, Dan? Because there were other parks. There were other parks in the residential area. So I thought I saw one in particular, but yeah, I mean, it depends on what you want this central space, its purpose is a gathering space and being able to traverse and maybe have like a market or something on the weekends is different than a playground and kind of that thing. But there's a park over, you'll have to blow, yeah, right there. Not sure what kind of park that is envisioned there.
I've actually been to like art shows and craft shows in Lincoln Park, and it really works okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not so big that you can't see everything, you get to see everything. I mean, it's cozy, but if we get to open up the streets a little bit, maybe that helps.
One other question I have, I know that the town was potentially looking to pursue a relationship with Edge, whether the rec fields could be opened up for some events in the right circumstances. If we're looking to move Summerfest out there or fireworks or something, if occasionally those rec fields could be negotiated as town use for events larger than what we might do in that 1 acre triangle. I know nobody has the answer to that today, but it's a nice, big, well-maintained rectangle that if we didn't take too much advantage of, it might.
Likely to be artificial turf.
Yeah.
I suspect that just maybe can't be used.
Mhm.
And Memorial Park really is close. I mean, we can't, unfortunately, we can't connect the two. That's the thing I think that troubles me the most is we can't get directly from one to the other. But, you know, I walk through Memorial Park every day and it's big. I mean, it's good size and we could do a lot of things in that park that we may, that for programming that you wouldn't want to bring downtown. In downtown, you could do smaller event type things.
Mhm.
Speaking a little to our research on the modeling committee again, none of the places we looked at really had expansive green space central to retail. Really, it was just if you and I were having a conversation, and we wanted to meet in the downtown, where would we say we were going to meet? And
Mhm.
just to have a central sort of gathering point, a center point for the area that could be identified by people who wanted to gather. And an acre, I think, would be more than plenty for that purpose. And it was probably bigger than we saw in all of the other models that we looked at. So,
Right, it gets hard
Just
for us
to-
to spot each other bigger than.
Just to pick up on Kim's comment about trying to connect better to Memorial Park, is that something that this committee, again, wants to provide a strong recommendation, and some of it might be changes the council might need to make in order to really enable that connectivity? I don't know, Dan, if you can talk to that a little bit, but you know, in this conversation, I'm hearing a lot of, we really want this big green space, and we do have Memorial Park, but Kim, like you said, it feels like we're limited in that connectivity. So if we can create that connectivity, does that address the concern for this committee?
I think that's
I mean, if you got one, why duplicate?
right.
You
And
know,
that's
it's-
clearly fair game for this committee, and I'd be shocked if you don't have a strong recommendation in that regard. Maybe you don't have the answers, but you know, a real strong directive to the council that they work hard to find that connectivity somehow.
Where would it connect? Like, I think we looked, there's that paper street. Is that a paper street? Above, right
Yeah,
there?
this, it's a part of the Downs land holdings. It's actually where the sewer line connects to Sawyer Road. So it's in part why it's there for the old grandstand. But it's not the required width for a town road. Sawgrass neighborhood here.
That's Sawgrass right there.
Yeah, is right here, and we're planning on, with this next residential area, providing a bike path and trail connection, or walking connection, I should say. So, you know, bike ped connections can be made or will be made soon. It's the, you know, right now, it's not allowed to have vehicular connections between commercial within the project and Sawyer Road.
And that vehicular prohibition is something that council has full control over. It's a zoning issue.
Well,
Dan?
you know, I think that the acre is fine. I think that the thing that's bothering me about that layout, if you could zoom in a little bit, Dan, is the proximity to that major road. It seems like the centerpiece to all of this is really that little triangular piece. And it has the opportunity to give you that small town village square that I think that everybody's looking at. And I think it was demonstrated in one of the earlier sketches by the designers, but it's Scarborough Downs Road being such a major artery that just kind of zooms you right through that area. It seems to me that any roads going around that park should be secondary roads to sort of slow the pace down around it. You know, promoting pedestrian traffic, promoting traffic that people are searching out of a mom and pop sort of shop instead of the larger places. It just seems like it's a little quick. So I guess, you know, I've been looking at this. I keep trying to figure out, why is this thing not feeling village-like to me? And I think it's the proximity of Scarborough Downs Road to the park. It's just, and then right across it, you're going to have not residential versus commercial, which I think is really what we're trying to get down into there, or at least a mixed use thing where perhaps the first floor is commercial and the second levels are residential, that type of thing going on there. But it just seems awful quick through there.
Dan, can you or your consultants prepare kind of a streetscape or a typical road section design, just so we can get a feel of, you mentioned on-street parking, if it's on both sides. I mean, there are certainly ways to calm the traffic. And so-
Yeah, absolutely. And the Scarborough Downs Road as it exists today, it's not we have to rebuild Scarborough Downs Road, and it's not actually going to be in the same location. Much like has occurred, as we work our way into the project from Route 1. And it's going to be designed as a main street, not as what's out there today. So I get your point. It's what's out there today is the opposite of what we want in the section. But one of the principles that we've heard from our consultants is if we're going to get any restaurant or retail development, they need to be on the main street within this project. It's a flaw to put them on a secondary street, is what we're hearing from the consultants. So
Think of Congress Street in Portland.
it's more of a
Major
design
artery.
discussion.
Marshall Street.
Yeah, and I've seen that, and I agree with what your consultants are saying. I mean, the town center projects that I'm familiar with in the Northern Virginia area, I mean, they had like 3 or 4 major restaurant draws that were there. And yes, they were close to the park, but they were somewhat removed. But when you got proximity to the park, then you went into a mom and pop restaurant versus, something large. And I'm not sure what, like that Tuscan Table or something down there in the main mall, that type of eatery that you would have there. Yeah, they command too much space to be directly into the village, but they need to be, removed. And I do think that that's right, but I don't still think that you need to have that, what appears to be the main street, which is that quick road, bisecting it, since you don't have that much perimeter area just by the configuration of this triangle to put stores around it. And we've already taken one side and made it a street as opposed to really sort of a slower street that you could have retail or directly off of, which I think is what we're looking for. And what was represented in the earlier sketches that I saw of this thing. So
When you have something going on in the park, let's assume we have something going on in the park, can we close that street that's on one side of the triangle?
Yeah.
Sarah's had her hand up. I want to make sure Sarah gets a chance to.
Thanks. Yeah, my only comment was, and I've just been listening to the discussion, and I think I'm guilty of this, is trying to think of that one space as like the only green space, right? That we have to cram everything into. And what I'm realizing as looking at this image is like, that I think it's the difference of a green versus a park, right? We can have a playground in another section of it. We can have, a rec field in another section. And that, what Tom has been saying is like, it's really just a meeting spot. And so does it really need to be all of these things, or really is it just a central green space, a meeting spot that has some connectivity, and that, we could close down some streets and it could become something bigger, but we really don't need like another concert outdoor venue if we have a connection to Memorial Park. So maybe it is truly just a green space where there's some benches and some pathways. So I guess my contribution to this is that, and just thinking, I think the 1 acre is the right size. And I think there's so many other green spaces that we could accommodate all of the other programming that, we've all said that we would recommend is included within the downtown. It may just not exist within that little triangle.
I think, hey, Dan, could you maybe change the word park to green or square? I think that's probably, that might be inspiring people
You can't call it a
interpreting that in a
square, it's a
different way.
triangle, but we would
Yeah,
do
Yeah.
Town green or
Or
village
just a
green.
green.
Village green,
Yeah.
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 Travis Kennedy Memorial Green.
Memorial. When do you think I'm
Uh-oh.
going to die?
I
Um,
hope so.
So, yeah, Tom?
Just to real quick to mirror Sarah's comments slightly and just add to it, hopefully. Every time we've spoken of these sort of center points, these meeting greens, they've always kind of been where all the roads lead to when you enter these spaces. So even though it is on sort of this major thoroughfare, even if you think of, I mean, we've referenced Bar Harbor a number of times, when you come into that area, you're delivered right to that green. And I think if we want that same effect, if we're hoping for this to be the center point and the connectivity point for everybody who's arriving here, then we kind of have to put it on these major thoroughfares in order for the traffic to sort of land there automatically. You also want to drive by it with frequency and see the activity and be drawn into this village-like space. So if it was tucked behind some buildings or on the periphery, we wouldn't have that same drawing in effect of if there was whatever programming was happening, whether it was a farmer's market, art fair, or just general hustle and bustle of that area, then I think we're doing it a sort of a disservice to tuck it away.
Remember, we have the opportunity here to build from the ground up. And when Dan was town planner, he often said to me, you know, most, if not everything, can be overcome by good design. So with this in mind, I mean, designing those roads with that maximum flexibility, pedestrian safety, I think there's an opportunity. I just think we need some more detail around that.
So back to your question about, can the committee get around like green space about this size? I'm gonna call it green space in a park. And assuming that the traffic speed, I think is a lot of what people are worried about, can be controlled on the Scarborough Downs Road. My recommendation, I can support it. I don't know if we want to take a vote or what, but to have, maybe we have an opinion or maybe we don't, but if we have an opinion, I think we should put it forward.
Yeah, I think that that's exactly the kind of probably ordinance recommendation we want to think about is what we would like for all considerations to be taken to slow traffic around the village green. And I think to Tom's point, I think that having the road go by it does eliminate a little bit of that feeling that you're trespassing if you have to walk to get there without being able to see it while you're driving by. I just think it gives it more of that public open feel if you're able to drive by it. But I do think you ought to drive by it as slow as possible.
Right? It gives eyesight into your activity center, right?
Yeah.
Right from the road.
And people that just are going to the grocery store don't have to go there, right? Like, so you don't have all that added traffic that you don't want. Like, they can pull right into that parking lot and
Right from.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
right.
this
from
isn't really
Hayes.
fully explained, but the intent here is that there are kind of loop drives or loop roads that you can drive into the grocery store, do your shopping and leave, or connect out to Payne Road. Same is true with the sports complex. If you're coming in for a soccer game or a hockey game, you can come in from Payne Road and you can come right in to the facility. If you guys can see my hand, park. Hopefully you're gonna go after the hockey game over to the brew pub or pizza place and not have to hop in your car and enjoy the park. But if you're in a hurry, you don't have to, and you can come back out to Payne Road. So obviously this is concept plan. We're still working through the details, but we're trying to kind of enable both, like that visibility for the main street, a good cross section. And Tom, I agree, we need to show and get into details around what's the width of the lanes and what's the parking like and where the street trees look like. And buildings do a lot to slow traffic if you site them properly, you know, close to the street, et cetera. So, but having that activity and traffic that wants to go down the main street sort of drawn there, but also having the ability to avoid it. And not unnecessarily use it if you're going for specific activities to larger buildings.
Dan, those are all two-way streets, right? Like the one along the triangle, that's it. Those are two-way streets, not just one way.
Yeah, yeah, so far.
Yeah, I think it's hard for us who have, and I'll be one of the guilty parties, used to live on that side of Scarborough and would use the town's road to get to Route 1. I think that's gonna change. People aren't gonna do that anymore because of all the residential and all of the road's not a straight line anymore,
Yeah.
right from one point to the other. It's not gonna make it quicker.
They do it now, though. It's there, but the road isn't redone. I mean,
Right.
it, from the Route 1 into where it turns into Tandem Court or Front Runner Park, it's pretty quick. There's nothing stopping you from Route 1 till you start to get to that curve. So
Yeah,
it's pretty quick. And there is on-street parking there too, but
I think though, once all that other stuff is in the
Yeah.
middle and you're gonna have to slow.
I
and
was
go
just
through
thinking four-way
traffic.
stop sign.
Yeah,
that
once you have to
intersection.
go through the traffic and weave your
Yep.
way around there. I'm not the expert, Dan, you'll figure it out, but it feels like it won't be appealing to go through there just as a cut through anymore.
That's-
Yeah, I mean, it's already the case when if you're cutting through from Payne Road to Route 1, once you hit the residential portion, you naturally slow down. And if the whole stretch is like that, you lose that value.
Dan, if you keep the potholes, that will help slow down.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like our responses to the Goody Clancy model in relation to recommendations we might want to make kind of skew directly into ordinance, which is we want that road to be slow. We want to create as cohesive a connection to Memorial Park as possible. So it feels like you can do both in the same day. That's kind of what I'm hearing from the committee is it's not that we, at least collectively, look at that model and have a problem with it. It's that it has brought up to us some issues that we want to make sure the town may address beyond the downtown. Does everybody agree with that? Does that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move into ordinance recommendations then. And I know it's starting to get late, but I think we've started with two of them that are reasonably broad, which are those two exactly. We would,
Travis, can I just go back to the Goody Clancy?
Yeah,
I think,
sure.
One concept that they showed on their plan was maybe a third of the grandstand being repurposed, kind of the walls
Right,
removed, if you will.
yeah. Mhm.
I wonder, I think that was a really interesting idea. I think it helps with the repurposing of the rest of the building because it's a little smaller, but it also gives us, to our point of flexibility, some coverage space, some maybe architectural differences. So I wonder if that is an opinion of the committee, and if so, perhaps we got to make a clear recommendation in that regard,
Mhm.
or a preference.
Yeah, I liked it quite a bit. I think, when I was responding to our survey, coverage was one of the things that I really highlighted. The idea that, we have some flexibility in different weather and different seasons. I mean, it's still really just an idea, but as an idea, I was supportive of it. Certainly what happens to the rest of the building will matter. But it's kind of the one spot where you can create that sort of large coverage space where you might be able to have some control over climate and lighting and so on. Anybody else?
I'd agree.
I think our
Yeah.
feeling is that we like it.
Yeah.
In
I had my
particular,
head wrapped around that it was on the other side, but this
Mhm.
actually works because of the sun, because of the lighting.
And it relates perfectly to the town
To the
green,
town,
so.
Yeah,
it almost extends the town green dramatically.
And it gives some, I think, better opportunities for repurposing. There might be some business or restaurant uses that will be really interested in being separate, but kind of looking into that area.
As the grandstand has been the carryover from sort of the prior era of this space, I think it was competing a little bit with the green space as being that center point. What is sort of the center focus of all of this? And I think if you overlap them nicely with that effect, then it becomes one center point and would have I think a better presentation in people's minds as they approach this, that it all kind of cohesively makes sense as a.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we.
Yeah, I mean,
talk about.
And I do think that's an important conversation in both of the next two bullets, because I know at one point Dan had mentioned that may require some town commitment, and that also may open it up to the management structure conversation about whether that covered outdoor space is managed by this entity we're recommending that the town may have a say in. So I think if we all agree that we like it, our next conversation about it is Do we like it as a private thing that we hope we can visit, or do we like it as potentially a private-public partnership that could be part of the greater programming? And so, I mean, I don't know, I'll toss that question out, I guess, and whether anybody wants to dive into it right now. But I think certainly as a recommendation of keeping it, we are all on board with that. And then I guess maybe we would have to turn it over to Crossroads and ask, based on how that was drawn up, is that something that you would be looking to do as a purely private investment? Or did you have a vision for that being programmed into the greater green space?
Short answer is yes. So, I mean, we don't have a clear path for all that can happen in the grandstand and how to execute. That's really one of our key next steps, is to really dive into the structural aspects of doing that. You know, just in terms of how the building is constructed, the support beams, the roof, etc., and also the redevelopment aspects of the building. We obviously really like the concept, because I think, Tom, you said it really well. You know, it kind of merges the not the park, the green, the triangle outdoor space with the building, so they're integrated. They're kind of one destination to a degree, one focal point. And so now we're starting to jump into, okay, how do we tackle this? And really are open to a variety of ideas, but we think it's important to have a clear kind of vision and start proceeding on it in terms of the form of the building and when we're going to act on it, because it's such a dominant feature that we're like fully embracing it with this design, so you can't hide it. And so we need to give other end users and residents, et cetera, you know, sort of a picture of what it's going to be in a timeline, so that they're, you know, interested in the downtown and being next to it.
Well, and I guess it just contributes to the report that the grandstand committee prepared already, which is that we would very much like the grandstand to have public access as much as possible. So this is just an extension of that recommendation. John Anderson?
Thanks, Travis. Yeah, just along the lines of public-private partnership, Dan, what do you think the committee needs to recommend in terms of, again, revisiting the edge and you know, a public-private partnership of some sort to make sure that Scarborough residents get some sort of preferential treatment as that comes into town? I know the committee existed before COVID, things happened. It's actually been something lately I've been getting a lot more questions on is, you know, when are we going to have a community center with what's going in the Downs? Are we going to get preference and make sure we have access? And I think that's a conversation that I don't think we fully closed from the last committee, but we need to figure that out, and maybe having this committee provide another recommendation to revisit that again or something of that sort.
Sure, in terms of edge in particular, and yeah, I mean, we're really focused on the grandstand edge. You know, they're two different, potentially very much two different things. And then those other key kind of elements, you know, grocery and some residential. They're, I think it's a 4 to 5 legged stool for this downtown, and they're all high priority right now. So, you know, recently Tom and our team and the school department had kind of a reconvening on edge, just to, because edge is kind of back in the fold and concentrating on the project as the COVID wanes, if you will, hopefully, knock on wood. And so we want to start those conversations again and with the school department in particular and see where that goes, because we want to progress edge in some form, because we think it's really important for the project. It's important for the community to have that type of facility. And But we need to kind of get back to those conversations, see how holistic of a facility it can be, you know, because that may not be possible, so.
John, do we know what the community wants in a community center? Is that part clear?
Yeah, I can take that one. Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty well defined and actually incorporated into it. What the committee presented in their report looks a lot like what is on the map here. And that included both a community center section and a private ice rink and turf and other amenities. So it's big though. And the price tag was also big. And that's kind of where we left it, was that it was kind of a little too big for us to bite off and then fill it out.
I'm just wondering if part of the grandstand could meet some of that community center requirement and the edge might meet some of the other parts. So maybe when we think about the grandstand, you've got this huge building. Well, we probably don't need the whole building, but maybe a piece of it would serve as that community part of what the community center wanted. And not necessarily sporty, but I don't know what, but.
Well, there's some community services programming that was, and senior
Senior
programming
programming.
that was incorporated into the community center that I think could easily fit there. And that would make the edge facility smaller.
So we're close to 8 o'clock and I don't want to keep people here much longer, but I think that you know, functionally, we have 2 meetings left to try and make some decisions. And I would like for us, we're sort of in the ordinance section now. I would like for us to come to our next meeting and build that ordinance recommendation section on a list of questions that we should take through one at a time and potentially take votes on at our next meeting, which include a recommendation to slow traffic as much as possible along Scarborough Downs Road in the downtown, a recommendation to make as cohesive a connection to Municipal Park as possible. We probably want to have a little bit more discussion about what we want to say about the grandstand, but we already have sort of addressed it, I think, in unique recommendations, which is that we want it to have as much public access as possible. And then I think I'll ask Dan to come to our next meeting with some specifics on what you want to ask us to weigh in on housing, and if there are any other items that you would like, tell us what words you would like the committee to make a recommendation based on, and we may adjust them. But I think that we should spend the bulk of our meeting on that section, and then maybe the bulk of our last meeting on the management structure. And so we'll have worked our way through all of the bullets of our report. We'll give staff some time to draft it into something, and then we can spend our final meeting on the 14th reviewing and approving, if that makes sense to everybody. So if there's nothing else, we've taken care of item 6 as well. Does the committee have any other discussion or questions that we want to take care of tonight?
I just wanted to ask Dan one question. In as far as the ordinance process and thoughts that we have, is there anything you want us to focus on or think about that we're not thinking about?
I think my memo or outline from the prior meeting covered those things. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I can send that around to the group again. But those were the items I had, Kim. And at the end, there were some additional ones that didn't have a narrative. And those are also important. They just need more thought. But I can send that around to the group now or tomorrow, so that you have some time to look at it prior to the next meeting.
Dan, it strikes me ultimately there's going to be some very specific, very granular changes that you'll need to execute road design standards, maybe parking requirements that we're simply not going to know. So maybe we kind of flag them generally is just needing to be receptive and calling them out as a topic. But I don't think we'll get to the point of being very specific. This section needs to be changed this way.
I totally agree. I think that could also be something useful for relaying to other key boards and committees, not that you have the answer, but, or we even know yet, but to, hey, planning board, we anticipate X, Y, and Z might be necessary just based on this design, or whatever, transportation committee, whatever it might be, that might be a way to handle it so that they're made aware of the topic, at least at this stage, not necessarily the solution. Does that make sense, Tom?
On the housing piece, or the residential piece, can we get a feel for what the impact on the schools would be with your ask? Because I think that's a big sensitivity in the town.
We have all that information that we've worked on over the last few years. So absolutely. But I can provide that to the committee. It's really based on housing type where you have school impacts. And
I think this committee could acknowledge I'd say the necessity, but the importance of people living proximate in this area being key to the success. And maybe a cautionary note that
You need to
council ought to concern
understand-
itself with impacts that come with the different housing types. Yeah, that's going to be a big debate. I suspect.
Well, it's not going to be single family homes in the downtown.
Right.
It's going to be predominantly low impact for your schools.
But simply put, what they're proposing at the magnitude and the pace that they've been able to build at so far is cannot be supported under the current system that's in place.
The current school system.
No, the current ordinance system.
Oh,
growth
I see.
management
Yes,
ordinance.
yeah,
Mhm.
right. It's just because it's not single family homes doesn't mean it doesn't have children. If it's, low income, affordable apartments, it can have
Three-bedroom.
children, right?
But there is
We have a-
absolutely.
Yeah, that's correct, Kim. We have a whole model that was presented. Dan, maybe we can just link that and include it in the share drive so everyone can have a look at it. I will say though, it's like fairly comprehensive, and maybe I'll take an action, and Travis, you can give this to me. There was a presentation, I think a year ago, maybe 2 years now, that tried to distill that down into a little bit more consumable information. I can try and find a link to that, though at that point it was pre-COVID, so I'm not sure we have a YouTube link. But either way, we can get a summary out to you guys to show like the model that we're looking at that basically has led us to the decision that we need another school because of the development and the type of development that is happening.
That would be great, Sarah. Ultimately, it's sort of what Tom just said, I think, is what our mission's going to be in 2 weeks. We're going to have a list of requests and ideas, and we're going to determine the degree that we want to make a recommendation versus just flag it for a committee or a staff member that works at a much deeper level than we're capable of. So some things are going to be, we think you should do something nice, and others will be, we think you should do exactly this recommendation based on our, based on our identifying needs for the downtown. So I think we're going to do some wordsmithing, but it would be great if Dan, you can bring to us some starting point questions that we can do our best to find middle ground on. So that sort of takes care of next agenda as well. I think we'll stick with this format, although we've largely worked our way now through existing conditions, wants and needs, recommendations, response to the Goody Clancy model. We'll spend the bulk of the next meeting on ordinance recommendations. The meeting after that, we'll want to focus on management structure. And then I think the final meeting will hopefully have something that we can review and adjust and make a vote on. I don't see any members of the public present. Are there any in the?
No.
Okay,
No.
so we have no comments from the public tonight. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Art. Second, Kim, dream team. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.